All right, guys, we are back. We are back. So, got a quick little review of the week for you. And this one comes in from RJ. RJ says 5 stars. Great podcast. Great guy. Nice title. I like it. So, Dan is such a great representative of this journey of Christian dads. Dan's interviews are so relaxed and just get to the real conversations. So, thanks, RJ. Third is technically how he signed in. So, appreciate that. Let's rock, guys. Let's rock. So, appreciate you guys throwing the reviews in there, hitting the 5 stars, checking out the YouTube, whatever it is that you guys do, and stay engaged and continually listen to old episodes. It always cracks me up when I see like episode 7 and people are listening to that one. So thanks, guys, for just binging these things and knocking through them. So it's pretty cool to see. And oh, but I wanted to mention we've got like a number of listeners from Australia coming out of the woodwork. So it's kind of funny how this thing spreads around the world, but Australia is like the newest one that's kind of on fire down there. So hello to all you Aussies. So let's jump on in. So today we have got a guest that I've been waiting to have on for quite some time. Why this hasn't come together sooner, I have no idea. But when these things come together, it's always wonderful. So today we've got Michael Burke, or I call him Mike Burke. He is the author of a book called Waiting to Die, Running to Live. He's a 9-time marathoner, 20-time half marathoner, and he's been named one of the top 100 people to know in St. Louis. And also, he was diagnosed to be dead when he was a little kid. However, he is now, how old are you?
Old enough to have all this. 53. I'm 53.
53. So he's got a nice little beard working today, and he's got a lot of gray in it, guys. A lot of gray in it.
I'm proud of that. I'll take these crow's feet. I'll take it all.
Absolutely. Yeah, for you, absolutely. Because you weren't supposed to live past the age of
5 to 7.
5 to 7 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at 1 year old, the average kid was living just past, 5.
That's crazy.
So, totally childhood disease, no teenagers, no adults.
So I haven't ever introduced anybody on the podcast. So by the way, welcome to the Journey of a Christian Dad podcast.
Thanks, Dan.
I haven't ever said, hey, you were supposed to be dead when you were a kid.
Well, good.
Get it,
but that's not common.
get it kicked off on like a super positive note. But
right.
you kept living past your life expectancy. You were diagnosed with CF, cystic fibrosis, which back when you were diagnosed, it truly was a death sentence. Like nobody made it past that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It was the number one genetic killer of children. And there was just such minimum knowledge about it. There was really no medicine specifically designed for it. So we were borrowing from whatever they could find that was working. So yeah, it was grim. I mean, there's kind of no way around that. But as we'll talk about, things don't always work out the way the data says it's going to work out.
That's right. That's right. So as a kid, what was it like knowing that you were going to be dead? Or do you even remember much of that?
So when it hit me, I was a little older. I was 15 because I didn't know how sick I was as a baby. I was really, really sick as an infant. And then with some medical intervention and some daily therapy from my parents, I started thriving. And I played soccer and basketball and backyard football with my brothers. And I didn't realize I was sick, but I coughed a lot. I could just have this underlying cough. I took 10,000 pills a year just to digest food. And I had this daily therapy regimen where my dad would lay me across his lap and beat on me. Like they call it postural drainage. And he would do this 800 times a night. It would make me cough and get the deadly stuff out of my lungs. But I still didn't think I was abnormal or abnorate because nobody made a big deal about it. Nobody's parents made a big deal about it. My buddies really didn't ask. But when you go to high school, you meet a bunch of new kids, and everyone was asking, why are you going to the hospital every year? What's with all the pills and the cough? And so I had to tell them, and I got curious like every 15-year-old would. And I read all about CF, the things that were never spoken about. And I read my life expectancy had been increasing, but it was still just 18 years old. So at 15, I read well beyond the initial expectations, and that the current life expectancy is 18. And so that began my real journey with CF. That the mental journey, the mental and emotional journey began at that moment.
What happened when you realized you had 3 years to live or 2.5 years to live?
I was always a happy kid, engaged with friends and things that I enjoyed, but it really sank in that I had a short time to live, or so I thought. And for me, it was like this: if it's not fun, don't do it. So, fortunately for me, I like to work. I worked at a golf course all through high school. So I kept engaged in life that way. But when it came to school or anything else that wasn't fun, I didn't do it because I just couldn't see the value in, pursuing things that were difficult like school. Because, I mean, what was the point? I wasn't going to go to college. I wouldn't be around for that. I wouldn't have a career. It just, my mind really started laying some tricks on me about the future. And I just got real short-term thinking. And again, the biggest thing was, if it's not fun, I'm not doing it.
How far off the rails did you go? When I'm thinking with the quote, if it's not fun, don't do it.
Bad. I mean, I went to school. I didn't skip school, but I mean, I did the absolute minimum. I was a C.D. student, just enough to get by. And
That was the first thing I thought of was, to heck with studying, to heck with.
yeah. And I didn't enjoy it. And I didn't like it. I wasn't a great student. So that was the first thing that went away. Like, forget it. And but what's interesting about that, Dan, is when I got properly challenged by a couple teachers, in really hard classes that somehow I got into, I got A's and B's. So those were glimpses that would come into play later. But yeah, school suffered the most. And then relationships suffered, like girls. I just really wondered. I'm like, man, I cough, I have digestion problems, and that you can imagine what that scenario is like. I'm like, what girl's going to want to be with me? I did this whole mess. And plus, I'm not going to live very long. So that was the second big thing that suffered. And but day to day, I was good, happy, had fun, with my buddies. But when it came time to make bigger decisions, I had this real short life expectancy. It popped up. So day to day, I was pretty good. But when it came to bigger decisions, it really, really affected me.
Such as?
Oh, my father, I had 3 older brothers and they all went to college. And my dad went back to college after working in the workforce for a while. So college was important to our family. And he asked me one night, where are you going to college? And I said, well, I'm not going to college. And of course, he was shocked to hear that and said, well, why? I was like, well, what's the point? I'm going to be dead in 2 years. So now we're at 18. We flash forward to 18, but the life expectancy is still just like 20. And then really there's no one older than me by a few years. There's no 30, 40, 50-year-olds. And so my dad, who was just amazing, very direct, but loving, he leaned into the table, and sorry for the cursing, guys, but he said, bullshit, Michael, you're going and you're gonna do well. And he's almost like, you got that? You're going and you can do well. So he snapped me out of this little short-term or short-sightedness I had. And I did go to college and I did do well. I mean, far exceeded what I thought I would ever do, and graduated from a 4-year college in 4 years.
Wow.
right on time. I got a little behind, because I was bad at math. So I had to make that up. In the last semester I had graduate level classes because I was a little behind and I had to graduate on time. So they let me in the graduate level classes and I got a 4.0 that semester.
Nice.
So, what I discovered from that is a good challenge works for me. A good challenge kept me focused on something positive instead of dwelling on all the what ifs of cystic fibrosis. And yeah, so it was dad, and he was always the one who was my big encourager.
So I heard two things. We just had John O'Leary on not too far back. Amazing podcast. If you haven't listened to that one, people jump on that one. But he said, I was burned all over my body. So how could I possibly be attractive to girls? That guy girl thing that happens in high school and junior high and stuff. He's like, that was tough for me. That was tough for me to navigate. Like the confidence, I just really didn't want to go there because, who would love a, guy who's burned over 100% of his body? And then the other thing was the massive influence his parents had on him. When he was young, he wanted to just sort of get by. Well, because he was disabled, he didn't have hands. And his mom said, "You're an O'Leary. We play piano. Therefore, you're going to learn to play piano." But I got no hands.
Right. Right.
And there's your piano teacher. She's at the door. Practice starts now.
Yeah.
No choice. So with your dad saying college and you're going to do good, basically we're Burks and this is what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And mom and dad had their own fears. When I was little, way back, they wouldn't let me play outside because the kids who were passing away of CF were passing away of lung infections, germs.
Yeah.
So I was being sheltered heavily, and my dad just couldn't take it anymore. Right? He was an active guy, played high level soccer, was asked to try out for Olympic team. Right? So seeing his little boy inside, not playing anything while his older brothers are out in the backyard, it was too much for him. So he finally got the courage to let me go play. And, as it were, I fell down, I got muddy, and he got scared, but he stopped himself from coming out and getting me. So he had his own fears to overcome first. Because if fear, a mutual friend of ours calls fear the thief of joy.
Yeah.
It's also the thief of moving forward. So, you could imagine, would I have ever done any of the cool stuff I did and lived this long life if my dad would have remained in fearful, protecting me instead of letting me blossom? So mom and dad had to overcome their fear.
What was that feeling when dad opened the back door?
Oh my God. So, my brothers are outside with all the neighborhood boys. They're playing like football, like not like any rules football, but the dummy who dares to pick up the football is going to get murdered, right? And then the next kid picks up the ball and it's just this thing. So I was just watching through the glass window, and my dad's watching me, and he goes, "Go get ready." And it was like liberation. And he opened that door and I shot out into that melee of boys and properly got crushed, got nailed. My oldest brother's 8 years older than me. So one of the bigger boys just crushed me, but that was the game. And I got muddy, and, the mud and the bruise, there was badges of honor. You were hanging with the big boys. So it felt really good. And then my brothers always included me. I was still a little bratty little brother, but they included me in everything. So it was really good. And I really maintained that was the moment that was really one of the key moments in my life growing up. Him dropping that fear. And I know we're talking with some Christian dads, and I was raised in a very Christian household, went to 12 years of private schooling, at a Catholic school, and that was a part of our life. And I think what he did is he got beyond what was not of God, fear, and tapped into, purpose and passion and his values, right? He really knew what was important in life, and sheltering his boy wasn't one of those.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be a tough thing to do. That's for sure.
I mean, it was scary. It was scary, Dan. I mean, their kids were not doing well. And my mother would have to go down to the clinic I'd been to the doctor every 3 months of my life. And there were kids not coming back from those quarterly visits. So this is really fresh. This doesn't go away in my parents' mind. So it really took a lot for them to overcome this whole thing. I'm just so proud of them.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It takes a lot as a parent. And often you just are in fear. So you just don't think past it. So we're going to talk about some things here in just a bit that address that fear and recognizing thoughts and how to take those thoughts and transform them. So um, before we dive into that, had a quick thought on your college experience. So that first little semester, second semester kind of thing, kids often botch that up in the most big time way because they're not prepared. So, did your dad give you any guidance on that first or second semester?
Well, what was interesting is I tested well, first of all, I didn't have any kind of grades to get into a 4-year school. So I went to community college first 2 years, which was fine. It was cheaper. But I tested into some remedial stuff, remedial math and remedial English. The math I understood, like I knew I was bad at math, but English? So I said, Dad, I'm testing into remedial English. In the first 2 days of class, we're diagramming sentences, verbs, nouns. I'm like, I learned that in the 3rd grade with Sister Patricia. I know how to put together a sentence. He goes, well, go to the dean and tell him you know this. I'm like, I can't go to the dean. He's like, yeah, you can, and do it. So I went to the dean. I'm like, Dean Boyer, I'm way beyond this. What can I do? And so he said, well, Michael, write me a 1-page document, what you did this summer, and we'll see if you can put together a sentence. And of course I did. I knew I just didn't test very well, but all of that time I didn't pay attention in high school, in grade school, I guess I did. So what that taught me is, one, you can be assertive, you can ask for what you want. 2, I was a lot smarter than I ever gave myself credit for. And my dad had not one doubt about it. So what I quickly picked up is Dad's awfully confident in me. I don't see why that is, but he sees it. So I started borrowing his confidence, his belief.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to emphasize that.
Okay, yeah.
Our belief and our confidence in our kids, they can borrow and then they can transform and step into confidence. So it's so critical that we speak into their life and tell them things like, you can do this. You are going to do this. I believe in you. Like God said that to his own son. Like, so let's continue that tradition and lift our kids up. So that's huge. So it's really, really cool to hear your dad was a massive encourager for you.
He was all the time. I mean, it was nonstop with him.
Should we
Yep.
jump into fast forward a little bit and get into marathon running and crazy bicycling events and everything else?
Yeah. And this is really one of the first points I want to make too about what's going on in our mind. So I go to college, I did well. I worked for American Express Financial Advisors right out of college, did well with that, but I was restless, right? One of these little tricks of the mind, which we call saboteurs, is restless, where you're never happy with where you're at. The grass is greener somewhere else. And I had a strong restless saboteur in my mind because I'm still on this short time frame. And so I wanted to pack life in And so I moved to Colorado on a whim, and I got a new life, new career, all of that, and I started doing really really good in my career, moving around the country, and after a few years of that, it caught up. I wasn't taking care of my body. I was the youngest director of sales for Omni Hotels, so I was doing really good on that end, but the body came crashing in because I wasn't taking the medicine. I didn't want to go to the doctors. I didn't want to think about it. And that's another saboteur of the mind we call the avoider. I didn't want to think about the hard stuff. So again, if it wasn't fun and exciting, I wasn't paying attention to it. So I got really sick twice within just a few short years. And right before going from Richmond, Virginia to Detroit for my last hotel assignment, I was asked to give a speech at a CF event. And I was ignoring the whole thing. So I had to go find out, what the charitable little thing, what charity was going on, what research was going on. And oh, by the way, what's the life expectancy? And I was within my birth month, so rolling up on my 30th birthday, and I read the life expectancy was 28. I had finally leapfrogged my life expectancy. And the light bulb went off. I heard these voices in my head that said, you're going to die young, you're going to suffer before you die. What girl would want to be with you? And how are you going to bring value to the world? And being a young guy in his 20s and making some good money, I didn't have a problem with the girls, even with this face, right? So that was a big lie. I was a very successful financially, providing tremendous value. Lie number two. I was nowhere near dead, and I only suffered when I didn't take the medicine and didn't go to the doctor. So these saboteurs of my mind, these lies, were running my life into the ground, particularly my health. And it finally got so bad, I had to leave that hotel business to move back to St. Louis to really start taking care of my body because I was sick, creating the things I feared.
Yes.
Divorced, right? Because I wouldn't talk about it. And, when someone dives into this challenge with you, you got to talk about it. But I didn't want to. So all my little saboteurs were creating the very outcomes I feared. And that's the self-fulfilling prophecy of these patterns of our mind, our negative patterns of our mind.
So you mentioned needing to talk about it. In this case, you mentioned your marriage. So I just recently had a guy who shared a ton with me about loss and raising a daughter, a couple daughters, and going through difficult times with teenagers and all these different things. And unfortunately, and he's been super open with a whole bunch of people and really helped them become better parents and better communicators and connect better with their kids. And unfortunately, just a couple days ago, his 19-year-old daughter died in a car accident. And with that, a whole bunch of us were posting on his Facebook page. And my main comment to him was, please keep talking to the guys that you talk to. Please keep opening up. Please let us know how your journey's going. And that none of us, we all love him, and none of us want him to carry this burden by himself. He's actually not Christian. So he doesn't have Christ. He doesn't have the Lord to carry his burden for him or to help carry his burden or any of that. So like my fear is that he'll go into isolation. He'll go into avoidance. And something you and I have done for 9 weeks.
Yeah.
So I've been doing something called positive intelligence training or mental fitness, or what was the word you used today? Thought command. So we've been kind of taking some of these biblical principles. The place we got it from, or you got it from, that you shared with me isn't necessarily a biblical source. However, as I started trusting you and said, if you're this into it, there's something to this. I read the book and thought, it's a really good book, but I need some help implementing. And as I read the book, I saw so many biblical similarities. So I said, hey, would you come on and share a little bit about what we've done, the coaching that you do? And by the way, the topic of the podcast is the Journey of a Christian Dad podcast. So as you're prepping to be interviewed, tell us kind of what you've gone through and what you've discovered and thought through and all that.
Yeah. So returning to the story real quick, I heard my thoughts and I didn't want to be directed by them anymore. So, and I needed to take care of my body. So I moved back home, and the way that I got healthy was running marathons.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I just wanted to tie that up. So it comes definitely into play here, because my thoughts would have said, well, you've got CF, you have damaged lungs, you don't digest food. What makes you think you could run a marathon? But because I had heard this negative chatter, I could do something about it. I didn't want to be directed by that. So I set the biggest goal I could imagine, which was running a full marathon with damaged lungs and bad nutrition. But it was this huge purpose and passion, right? And that purpose and passion was really taking control of my life, what I could control. And with that, my thinking started to shift big time from limitations to possibilities. See, purpose and passion is just a different way to be motivated than fear. And with purpose and passion, my mind really opened up. How do I take this medicine better? Is there a way I can take it that the doctor doesn't even know about? What food can I eat that's easily digestible that then a marathoner could benefit from? So I got super creative and flexible and adapting in my thinking because I wasn't being driven by this negative stuff. Anxiety, fear, sadness, disappointment, anger. So my mind opened up, and so did my heart. It is no mystery that when I made this when I heard the voices and changed my perspective to what's possible, is when I met my second wife, now of 20 years. It's when I started and when I made myself accessible to people with cystic fibrosis. I was an old man at 30, 31. I was an old guy and successful and now healthy. And parents were looking to, like, they wanted their kids to see that. And so I started sharing my story. And then that blossoms. And then now people are looking to you because you're this positive light. And that wasn't my intention. But this is what happens when you turn to the light, driven by purpose, passion, awe, joy, instead of the other stuff. You're magnetic. Those saboteurs of the mind are not magnetic. So PBS did a documentary, and I was featured in that, like News 5 and Channel 4 and 2. They all picked up this story. And this is also at the very same time when I took CF from a curse to a blessing. I had a dear friend that I went to grade school and high school with, and he was always a good, engaged Christian man his whole life. And I wasn't. I really let CF interfere with the whole idea of God. And he kept inviting me on a retreat. I was like, I'm not going to this thing. I'm not even sure what I'm sure of. But I saw something in him. We had a business together, and I saw something changing in him. And it's like, well, okay, I'll give it a whirl. And it was this beautiful weekend retreat. And at the end of that retreat, we were to say one prayer, kind of wrap up our whole experience. And it just, a very emotional moment. Out of me gushed gratitude. And I couldn't believe the words coming out, the thoughts coming out of my mind, because it was alone time in chapel. And it was, the CF thing has been the blessing of a lifetime. Look how much love you've received. And I mean real deep love, sacrificial kind of stuff. look at the charity. I mean, so much money raised because people knew my parents, my brothers, and myself. The Although I figured out girls a little later, none of them were scared of CF. Not one of them said, "No, I don't want to be with you because of that." It was actually just kind of the opposite, and I had to manage that. Like they were super attractive. So I had to decide, is that real or is that not real? And then would I have ever once had a desire to run a marathon, much less 9, much less an Ironman, without CF, without something there that really gave me a sense of how precious life was? I don't know. I don't know, but what I do know is that moment I changed the whole perspective on this curse of a lifetime, and it became a blessing of a lifetime.
And now with your coaching, you're able to help people navigate thoughts, super challenging ones like that. Like that one's a tough one to overcome.
Yeah. So we call that turning, we call that the sage perspective. My saboteur was all fearful about the whole CF thing, right? It's a curse, it's a curse, it's a curse. The wisdom inside of me, the being who I am, I know that might be a little woo-woo for people, but the person I was created to be knows better, right? Knows that life is precious and people are amazing, and really difficult things are not to be brawled with, but we surf our challenges because they're there. We can't fight what's out of our control. So we control our thoughts, which direct our actions. And we can learn to do that. You don't have to go decades of hard knocks to get these lessons. We can do it in as quick as 6 weeks to literally change, upgrade, or up level, if you will, our mind, which gives us the thought command, which allows us to turn real difficult stuff into gifts and opportunities, and then take inspired action. What I mean by that is CF was such a bummer, and I allowed it to hold me back for so long. And then when that click happened and that blessing thing happened, I started running. I started living all of life completely. Happiness, still maintained success, relationships, right? Relationships blossomed, and I became more of the child of God that I am.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the thoughts I had were like Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Without being able to recognize that a thought came in that's maybe destructive, maybe a lie, maybe the word you use, saboteur, something that's going to take you down, it's like, well, what can I do to, one, recognize, and then two, what can I do to take captive and transform? Like, I need some tools, some help. Some of the stuff that comes in is, maybe there's a book, John Acuff, he calls it soundtracks. It's something that we've said over and over and over and over and over again, and it just is. It's not even something that we question, because it's just part of who we are. Before we jumped on, I was talking about your website and your little intro blurb you have and different things. I say, you didn't even mention CF. And you're like, well, some days that's kind of a part of me, and other days I sort of just forget.
I so closely aligned with CF when I was young. Anything that it just felt like an attack if someone said something about CF. So I had to separate my being from this thing. I am not the disease. The disease is in my body. It's in my lungs and my digestive system, but it's not who I am. It helped me become the person I am, but it doesn't make me who I am. And there's that philosophical thing. I am what my thoughts are, or I am my thoughts. Well, that's not exactly true, because what if your thoughts are really terrible thoughts? Are you a terrible person just because you have a terrible thought?
Well, yeah,
So we look,
because we keep
right?
telling ourselves. So like,
Well, that's what we think. That is an automatic pattern of the mind where we so closely associate our being with our thoughts. But our being is something much deeper than our thoughts and
correct.
emotions. And it's even much deeper than our actions. It's at the core what the greatest things that we can accomplish in life come from our being. Our being directs our doing if we know how to command our mind and have a sage perspective and know who we are. With something Dan we call, or Dan, you might remember the navigate power. We have these 5 sage powers, and it's basically operating life through the lens of a child of God, not something else, not something of God. Move through life with the values of Christian values.
You were going through your list earlier: anger, anxiety, all these things that God says, no, be not afraid. 365 times there's be not afraid, or don't be anxious, don't fear, on and on, all over the place. And as you were doing your prep work, you told me that I did just a quick Google search to find a couple Bible quotes about the mind. And you go, there was too many. It was littered throughout the Bible. It was
Yeah,
everywhere.
everywhere. And the recurring message, it's not a scientific message like we do in positive intelligence, but this is what I love about the work I do with positive intelligence and mental fitness. It's ancient knowledge. It's nothing new. We just have learned. Just what I believe is the body was created by God. So when we learn new techniques of how to grow gray matter and retrain our mind, we're just tapping into something that's always been there. This knowledge that we pass along was discovered by a man, Shirzad Shamin, and he's just the one who put it all together. And if you ask him in a business setting, he doesn't bring up spirituality and things like that. But us coaches, when we get our time with him, it's very much about spirituality. It's about self-actualization and becoming the person who you were born to be. It's just, in corporate America, we can't talk like that, right? So between you and me and the men here on the podcast, that's what it is.
So something I hear a lot. Well, to throw a label on it to make you sound important, as coaches, you call yourself or not saying you call yourself, however, a title in the world is executive coach.
You're right.
We could own our little small business where it's just one person and we're the CEO of our small business. My wife jokes around. She sometimes uses the title, "What do you do for a living?" And sometimes she'll respond with, "Well, I'm an estate manager.
That's awesome.
I take the kids to school. I bring them home,
Right.
do some other things, but it's so funny how people get wrapped up in identity and that kind of thing. But so executive coach. So let's say we're talking to the CEO, the COO of, a bigger company, somebody 50 employees, 500 employees, whatever. They have the same challenges that guys that are, whatever your job title is. Years ago, I used to sell furniture, sell electronics, used to manage a retail sales floor. So I certainly was not an executive. However, I had the same challenges that CEOs and executives have. Often we isolate, we go solo, our thoughts run rampant. Uh, the economy is about to fall off a cliff. Therefore, we're all losing our jobs. The store's going to close. The factory's going to close. The whatever. And we go. I was just talking to a buddy of mine yesterday, and he runs a very successful company, and he has for a super long time. House is paid off, boats paid off. He's got it made, and he's like, man, I've got all this anxiety, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I've got this disorder and this thing, and I'm seeing a psychologist, and man, we had a breakthrough today. And what I've discovered is I always go worst case scenario. Always go worst case scenario. So if I've got my plans together, I'm like, no, you're a great planner. Like you're really detailed, organized. Like that's a huge strength of yours. He goes, nah, the problem is let's talk later tonight. And maybe my wife is out of town and she's doing stuff and the call doesn't come when I think the call is going to come in. And I wait. And of course, next thing you know, she's kidnapped and they've taken her to Mexico. Because I go all the way worst case scenario, and then that just overcomes me. I'm like, no way, not you, super successful, life's great person. He goes, man, my thoughts, man, they get to me. So I'm doing this and this and this to get this figured out. So I'm introducing him to positive intelligence also. And like this will be fun going on this little journey with him and helping him through this. It's something I
Yeah.
had no clue. So
Yeah, we've retrained the mind of world-class athletes, CEOs and their executive teams. 500,000 people in 50 countries took part in this research, and it is just a brain development issue, and it's just the way our brain develops. There's no it wasn't my parents' fault that I had these saboteurs. It wasn't even it was nobody's fault. It was just the way our brain is wired to find what's wrong with things.
I'll back up. It was Adam's fault.
Thank you.
It was
Right?
Adam's fault. It was not Eve's fault. It was Adam's fault. He should have stepped in and said, no, this is not good.
He wasn't leading. Right?
He
Yeah,
wasn't leading. He wasn't protecting. He was
that's
passive.
right.
And then that allowed us to have a bent towards negativity and allow these thoughts. And that's where the devil got his foothold. And he throws a lot of these thoughts in our head.
That's right. So that's a really good way to think about the difference between a productive thought, a thought of a godly thought, or something else. So if the audience could just do this, they will accelerate their life in so many ways. When a negative thought or emotion occurs, if they're in that negative emotional state for more than 1 second, that's not of God. All we need is an alert. Whatever fear, anger, disappointment, blame, shame, 1 second is all you need for you to go, I wonder if there's something I need to be aware of. It's when we stick in that, it's when we stay in that, that's what's not of God, is staying in that. Because that's anti-love. We're motivated by two things, fear or love.
Yes.
That's everything. All the subtleties fall between fear and love.
Something I love about the system, that positive intelligence system, is it boils it down to like the simplest things. So fear and love, simple. There's with fear, there's all these things, background history, your own upbringing, interactions you had, all that. But at the core of it, fear. And
Right.
on the opposite side, same thing with love, your experiences, all those type different things that go into it. You're talking about the 1 second thing. So Todd Stottlemyre, former World Series champion, starting pitcher. Dad was Mel Stottlemyre of the Yankees.
Right.
He had some extreme emotional issues, extreme anger issues. And it came down to the fact that in his mind, he told himself the truth that he killed his brother. It's not what happened at all. He donated bone marrow, which then was rejected by his brother's body, and his brother did die. However, if he hadn't donated the bone marrow, his brother would have had no hope, and that kind of thing. But in his kid mind went to, I killed my brother. And he felt guilty about it all his life. And he had these anger issues. And so he calls a famous sports psychologist, Harvey, and Harvey says, I've been waiting for your call. And the thing Harvey did was he said, go around with a little notebook, and every time you have a emotion, think about it for a second, write it down.
Mhm.
Just do that. Just do that. Just do that. And then they talked about it. And he goes, ultimately, I was able to capture those thoughts, recognize that they weren't true, and I was able to transform them with the psychologist's help. And that's really what this is help us have productive thoughts, which then rewires our brain to have more productive thoughts, which then allows us to think in our creative space in order to think with hope, in order to think with possibility.
Mhm.
Words we use are gifts and opportunities. So something shows up and we're challenged by it, whatever that is. And instead of going to our negative thinking, instead of shrinking small, the language is in order the saboteur, the judge coming in and bringing us into a challenge space where you can't think well, like when you're in extreme fear, you're backed into a corner and your only option is one thing. Nah, when you're feeling good and the sun is shining and everything's going well, you've got a lot more choices and options and can think a lot differently. And in the we call it PQ, positive, short for positive intelligence, that allows you to get into your sage brain or that abundance mindset. However, you can't get there until you unlock yourself, you get out of that negative space. So, in order to do that, you've got to stop. You've got to do something to transform the space that you're in, kind of open up to possibility. And it can be a massive challenge to think about something negative comes in or something we perceive to be negative, unlock your mind and to think, where's the gift and opportunity in this horrible thing, whatever this horrible thing is. Maybe it's the fact that uh, they don't have cheeseburgers. They're out of cheeseburgers at the restaurant. But where's the gift and opportunity? Hey, I never should have ordered that cheeseburger anyway. I should have
Yeah,
gone for
that's right.
the thing.
The cholesterol machine. Yeah, and it's funny, Dan. You joke. We're joking about something trivial like cheeseburger, but when we're already stressed out, that something that simple can turn us on our ears. And you've seen it at restaurants and in public, people getting upset about nothing.
Somebody shot somebody in the drive-through because there wasn't like ice cream or
That's
something.
right. So this is just, yes, people not understanding that one, making mountains out of molehills. That's an analogy we use a lot. Because I have just seen the biggest challenges of a lifetime. People take this perspective that there's a gift and opportunity within that. We also something that is alignable to that is things happen for a reason, or this is God's plan. And there's nothing wrong with that look on things. It's very similar to this perspective that we're asking people to take.
And he uses all things for the good.
Uses all things for good. Now, the challenge in that is it's a little passive. We might just say that and then let our minds stay negative.
Yes. Okay. He uses all things for the good. Not this
right?
thing. I can't see that this thing's good. This thing's horrible.
Right. So we stick with, and it's very mysterious. Like, well, what did God want me to get from this? It's a little too like big and vague.
Vague.
Okay. And we can then get stuck in like why, the why question is almost impossible to answer. So if we say, let's boil this down to something simpler. Are there any gifts from this? Are there any gifts from this at all? That's different than why did it happen? You were talking about radical simplification of something huge. What's the gift? Well, I learned something. That's a gift. I am responding with some level of hope. That's a gift. What's the opportunity? I'm dying of cancer. What's my opportunity? To give back, to raise money, to live these last moments of life to the fullest, where I once took them for granted. There's always a gift and opportunity. And those are more easily accessible when you ask that question versus the bigger question of, why did God want this from me? And so what I like about this gift and opportunity question is it narrows our brain in a positive way this time to just look for possible gifts and opportunities. And I see it every day with even parents who lost their child to CF. They keep raising money, and that's the opportunity that this will never happen for other children. I mean, man, if you can do that, I think you can just about do anything. If you can find that perspective after losing a child, I think you can probably put good perspective on anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
The
it's
people that have
possible.
gone through that and you see joy on their face these days, I'm like, wow, that is amazing. I've met a number of different ones, and often they're Christians and often they have hope in something bigger. So um, it's cool. And we've interviewed the grief guru on the podcast, and she's one of them. And amazing, amazing, man. I was crying when I was interviewing her. She was, whew, the story was unreal. And then she's got some fabulous things to walk through it. Um, so couple Bible verses I wanted to hit was 2 Corinthians 10:5. It says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. So I'm like, this is just a powerful tool to help us make the thoughts obedience to Christ. When you're going through that laundry list of negativity, I thought about Philippians 4:8-9. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. What a promise that God will be with you. And so that's why I'm so passionate about this topic is, once you change the way you think, you'll change the way you live. Once you change the way you live, others will start saying, hey, how'd you change the way you lived? And then you can say, I changed the way I think. And you can then introduce the topic of faith, of, what have you. But you got to meet them where they're at. It's oftentimes too, difficult to hit them over the head with the Bible. And then they go, oh yeah, I get it. Like that one
Right.
typically
Right.
doesn't work. So what you and I are looking to do is put together a group coming up sometime here in the nearer future, and have a group of guys from Journey of a Christian Dad to jump in and literally transform our thoughts. So if you guys are interested, just hit me up, PM me, or the Christian Dad podcast at gmail.com. Shoot me a comment. Glad to touch base with you, give you a little bit more information. Michael's information is going to be in the show notes and everything. Hit him up as well. He certainly does do private coaching in addition to group coaching. He's phenomenal. He's coached a number of different guys that I know. Him and I have just gone through a coaching program together, and he helped me get a lot of these tools in my belt and be able to put them into practice. So I can't say enough good things about what I've learned going through that, and look forward to sharing them not only with others in the business world, but my wife and my kids and my softball teams that I coach. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
Not only that, I'm sharing them with a softball coach that is a coach of softball coaches that I know. So it's going uphill also.
I love that. The ripple is spreading. And coaches
Yes.
is a passion of mine because I coached marathoners for 10 years. That's how I got interested in coaching.
Oh
Because
yeah, back in the
I
day,
was coaching.
I did a
Yeah,
half marathon, and you helped coach me through the things I would need to know and the
yeah,
hurdles I was going to have to face going through that. It was beautiful.
yeah. So it's and dads are coaches. My dad was my biggest and longest coach through what I call an unwavering belief in his four sons. He not for 1 second believed we weren't capable of great things. He didn't put pressure on us to do great things. He was a coach. He helped us flourish. And it's no mistake that my brothers and myself have all been financially successful, relationship successful. It's the Burke charm. We're magnetic people because we're authentically positive, and we like thinking big, and we can lean into challenges with a positive mindset, not Pollyanna. We don't dismiss that there are problems in the world. We just lean into them with a positive mindset full of possibilities. So my dad is imperfect of a father as he was, as all dads are. He showed us the best things in life, which was the capability of ourself. And this is all I do. I brush away the negative stuff of the mind so dads can shine. Like their real true self can get out to their kids instead of the jungle of the saboteurs of the mind.
That's awesome. So you want to tell them where to reach you at? And also, would you like to throw out a challenge, something they can do week to week, something maybe not necessarily simple, but something that can be accomplished in a week, something that helps guys get better, become better dads, become better husbands, become better physically. Whatever the challenge might be that you'd want to throw out would be awesome. Guys love a challenge.
They do. So the one answer is going to get both of these. So they can find my website. You'll post it, but it's michaelburkecoaching.com. michaelburkecoaching.com. There's in the various sections, there's a downloadable PDF that I want them to download. And in that download is a 2-minute video. I want them to watch that thing and do the little mental fitness exercise in there as much as they can in the next week.
That's
And
awesome.
I'm not going to give away the secret, Dan. You can, if they go in there and watch this video, you can explain it to them and they can always call me. But what I want them to do is after they do this 2-minute little mental fitness exercise is take note of how they feel directly after doing that.
Nice.
Okay.
So I've done this 2-minute exercise, I'm quite certain, a whole bunch of times.
You have done it many, many times. The other thing that you can do in conjunction with that is to hear the voice in your head that says in some manner, you're not enough, or this situation is too hard. Hear that within your mind. Label it saboteur, and then do one of these 2-minute exercises. Recognize it, label it, do the exercise, the repetition. That alone could radically change your life.
Absolutely, it can.
That has been proven over and over and over.
So science and faith, they actually go together. And so what you just
they
told
do.
them is on the science side, it's been tested, proven, and it's true. There's scientific background that bases this one up. So guys, thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it. Look forward to you guys sharing this one with others. Again, rate the podcast. It means a lot. It helps other people come and check it out. Thanks for growing the podcast. And then feel free to join the Facebook group, The Journey of a Christian Dad. It's free. Jump in with other Christian dads on the journey. Catch you guys next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.